Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 campaign games I currently have up and running, both on camera and at home with my wife or my game group. It's going to be comparing Kingdom Death Monster to Middara to Oathsworn to Vagrantsong and finally to Vampire the Masquerade chapters. I love this genre of gaming, but they're big, they're bulky, they take up a lot of table space, and they're a commitment to dive headfirst into. I'm only able to semi-balance the amount of games we have running because, one, I have an amazing gaming partner in Shira, but then also, two, I do this for a living. So for you, if you're deciding on the next big campaign game you want to dive headfirst into, spend your hard-earned money on, and of course, occupy your table for the next month or couple of months if you're lucky, then in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the highs and lows, my thoughts if I was just getting into a campaign game, and where I think these fit in the spectrum of a gaming group and a board gamer specifically, player counts, and how I would approach them if I were you. I'm doing this video, one, because this is one of my favorite genres of games, and I always love an excuse to talk about massive campaign games that are ambitious, to say the least, but also because Vampire the Masquerade Chapters is currently launching their second printing Kickstarter, the definitive edition of Vampire the Masquerade Chapters. Now, we are doing some sponsored content alongside of them, and the way that sponsorship looks is, well, with that link in the top of the video description. If you click on that link and end up backing the campaign, you'll be supporting Quackalope as well. So if you're already interested in Vampire the Masquerade Chapters, do the simple task of hitting that Kickstarter link down below to make sure your support goes to both parties. Either way, let's go ahead and dive into the campaigns we currently have operating. The most obvious to start with is going to be Kingdom Death Monster, The Gambler's Chest. We are currently posting a series of campaign videos almost every week. I've missed a few trying to keep up with the editing backlog, but you can watch our campaign up to this point so far, and our first general impressions around The Gambler's Chest have been that it makes Kingdom Death both more complex, more advanced, more nuanced, and also better than it has ever been. I think Shira and I both agree that the Gambler's Chest and elements of the Gambler's Chest is something we'll be incorporating into every game of Kingdom Death going forward. But some base rules, some ground rules for you who are considering getting into Kingdom Death in the first place and considering getting the Gambler's Chest on top of all of that. Base Kingdom Death is a massive, brutal settlement builder. You'll be fighting one big creature, trying to harvest resources from them and survive on the back end. It's not about heroes. You don't get to keep your favorite character alive in perpetuity. Instead, they will be killed, they will be slaughtered, and often in the most unfortunate ways possible. So if you're okay with that, Kingdom Death, it might fit your game group. It is also hard and brutally unfair at times, so keep that in mind if you're going to be diving into playing it. There is a lot of outside knowledge available to learn about the progression trees and how you should craft gear and prepare for the end of the game, but the odds are you'll play tens, if not hundreds of hours of Kingdom Death Monster before ever finishing a full campaign because the loss rate is, or the loss potential is so high on those first few plays you go through. If I was going to be incorporating the Gambler's Chest, which I do recommend doing, I would only do it with a minimum group of 2. Base Kingdom Death can be a solo player experience and it can be wonderful at that, but you have to have some dexterity and some skill if you're going to be going into the Gambler's Chest. It adds layers and complexities with a philosophy, with a 5th character, which is the scout that's going out on the hunting expedition with you, opens up tons of doors and a lot of opportunity, but it is restrictive, and I think it makes Kingdom Death a 2+, preferably maybe 3-player game at minimum. Moving on down, let's go ahead and compare Kingdom Death Monster to the other big boss battler we have, which is going to be Oathsworn from Boardgames. This is a lovely game to critical acclaim, and we have really enjoyed the campaign up to this point. It is a little bit less open-ended than Kingdom Death is. Kingdom Death is more of an exploratory game, and the bosses here feel surprisingly unique compared to the bosses that we fight in Kingdom Death Monster. They both have their own flavor, their own texture that you're going to be diving into. If you like a little bit more of a hero-focused game, a little bit more of a choose-your-own-adventure storyline, and you like being surprised throughout the course of play, then Oathsworn is absolutely a game you should be queuing in on. Whereas in Kingdom Death, you're fighting very unique, very dark, very cryptic creatures and exploring a world full of the unknown, here in Oathsworn, the world's going to be a little bit more revealed to you, and as you open each one of the boss decks, you will be facing unique characters with their own unique mechanic system, but you'll be playing as the hero, grabbing your giant sword, upgrading your abilities, and playing cards in this cyclical refresh phase, a little bit of a rondel system that times how you do your most powerful actions, but when you can do a powerful action, it feels so sweet. For me, this is another two-player game. I like boss battlers at two-player. I'm going to be honest about that. Yeah, you have a little bit more to manage, but I really enjoy sharing that experience with other players around the table. However, I think my preferred place to play Oathsworn would be 4 players. I love the idea of sitting down with a full companion, a full party of players, reading through the narrative flavor text, and then facing off against this giant behemoth of a creature. And every single one of the bosses has felt satisfying to take down and consequential to the storyline. Oathsworn cannot recommend highly enough. Why won't you like this? Well, if you don't like boss battlers, you're looking more for a dungeon crawl or a campaign. If you're not so focused on the actual mechanics engine of the game, like for instance, if you didn't like Gloomhaven because Gloomhaven didn't have much of a story, well, this gives you quite a bit more of a story, a ton more world to build out, but I'd say the primary focus of Oathsworn is still that mechanics engine of the cards you're playing down, the abilities your heroes have, and how you progress through the narrative. And it's not as focused on the choose-your-own-adventure consequences as I would prefer personally as a player. Moving on down from Oathsworn, we're talking about boss battlers, but we're also talking about campaign games, right? Dungeon crawlers. We're merging towards the Middara-esque and the Vampire the Chapters-esque genre of gaming. We gotta mention Vagrantsong here, the small, accessible, bite-sized version of a boss battling campaign game with a very cool mid-size approach to the heroes you're playing, to the terrain that you're battling on, a single rollout flipboard, to the beautiful standees, there aren't any miniatures at all included in this game, and of course, the narrative progression. Vagrantsong has a lovely, cryptic, feels like over the garden wall sense of narrative storytelling that I can't get enough of. However, the gameplay can be a little complex and a little convoluted. You see, you take an enemy turn after every single one of your characters go, which means I can only really recommend Vagrantsong after playing it at I believe every player count. I can only recommend it at 1 or 2, with my preferred player count actually being a solo player game of Vagrantsong where you're controlling multiple characters while you progress through the game. It keeps you involved in the action and keeps you continuing to face the foes on the table. I would say Kingdom Death, compared to these last 2 games, is the most consequential, the most ruthless, the most brutal boss battler of them all. Whereas, of course, Oathsworn is going to be one of the more epic ones, right? The big heroes swinging their broadsword and cutting the throat of the giant rat feels glorious. Vagrantsong merges storytelling with the boss battling in a very, very interesting and amazing way. From events that change the terrain that you're fighting on to cryptics or haunts that actually transform while you're in the middle of a combat sequence. There's more storytelling that happens during the course of play in Vagrantsong than I think either game, other than, of course, the experiential things that you do by rolling dice and ripping off some lion testes. Vagrantsong takes storytelling in a very unique direction, something that I hope I see boss battlers do more often, giving you a chance to explore the narrative route as well as just the violent kind of sock 'em up, beat 'em route of the gameplay. This is one that I will end up finishing all of the expansion content for when it comes out, but probably on my own, and potentially not even on camera. The views on the gameplay videos so far have been dedicated, but not gigantic. So I'm still deciding if I'm going to be bringing back the gameplay videos as a permanent sequence here, or maybe just doing them over on Patreon. So, a boss battler that brings in some narrative storytelling, some adventuring. Let's talk about the two games that are more closely aligned with a classic dungeon crawler campaign, a D&D, an RPG in the box, and do storytelling in their own very unique, very innovative way, starting with Vampire the Masquerade Chapters. This game is kind of mind-blowing. It has these storybook mechanics where you're interacting with different NPCs, you're investigating, discovering things about the map, and engaging in real, actual dialogue back and forth with the characters on the board. This really feels like you have a DM that's running the narrative sequence, and the entire game is focused on that. Yeah, there is some combat, and there is some bosses that you have to take down, but they're never your primary concern, and you can usually figure out ways to work your way around them, except for some of the very specific boss fights, like taking down a werewolf. And then, when push comes to shove, buy all the gear you need, take out some allies, and let them have a handgun. At the end of the day, that's kind of all you need to progress, and focus on what Vampire the Masquerade Chapters does differently and does better than any of the other games on the table. It tells a story, one that you're in the middle of, one that you're taking part in, and I really do think it's remarkable for how it does it. So, if you're interested in backing Vampire the Masquerade Chapters, like I said, click the link in the top of the video description. You'll not only be backing a game that I think is very good, but you'll also be supporting Quackalope when you do so. So, Vampire the Masquerade Chapters innovates in the way that it tells the story. The flip books, the little storytelling books that allow you to engage in dialogue and do investigative work where you have consequences of your actions. These little mini choose-your-own-adventure scenarios that really do pay off in a variety of different ways. Middara takes the other approach. Middara is, I think, one of the most aggressive RPG, JRPGs, whatever you want to call it, and more classical board games that we're playing currently out of these 5. It's going to be a classic dungeon crawl. A lot of tiles, you're running in, fighting a heap of enemies, and taking down whatever objective you have. Usually, get somewhere, break something, or kill everything. It's going to be your classic dungeon crawl, but where it steps away from that is the way that you progress the various characters that you have, and the way that you engage in the story. This massive book fills this box with probably 3 or 4 novels worth of flavor text storytelling and adventuring to explore an entire anime collection or manga collection in a box. And you have this little red cryptic die that you're going to be flowing over the page, reading the consequences of what happens and what you do. We're a few episodes into the beginning of this campaign so far, and absolutely loving the adventure. The storytelling can be a little gimmicky sometimes. If any of you watch things like One Piece or Dragon Ball Z, you know at times the hair gets a little long and the voices get a little loud, but I can't stop loving everything we're running into. It's the idea of these characters that are pulled into an alternative world where they suddenly have magical abilities and powers, and they're figuring out how to survive, function, and graduate into real adventurers in the land and the world of Middara. This game has some of the most beautiful artwork, very, very classic but rewarding play, and allows you to focus on the heroes and the narrative story in a way that other games don't. It is massive, it takes a long time to read, and yet I really do enjoy it. I would say that Vampire the Masquerade Chapters is a 2 to 3 player game. I wouldn't probably go to the maximum player count because some of the narrative options that you have don't reward multiple people wanting to do multiple things at the same time. However, there are benefits to having multiple players on the game board, specifically with the powers and upgrades that each unique vampire has. You're going to want to be engaging in the different events, the investigation, the dialogue, the things that you're trying to overcome and accomplish with various skill sets depending on what the challenge ends up being. Whereas Middara, I really I really like Middara at, I believe, every player count, with my preferred player count being 4. The reason being is because every character has their own unique build and progression, and you are running 4 characters, just like Kingdom Death when you play, and I do find that it can be a little bit more unwieldy to run all 4 characters with 2 players, or with 1 player if you're diving into it for the first time. It starts you off kind of hot and heavy with a lot of powers, abilities, and ways to progress. So, we've kind of ran through all of these. You already know that Kingdom Death is my ground zero, my favorite campaign game ever. But the question is, where do I rank these? Where do I put these from that point on? I would say right now, after Kingdom Death, I would probably be leaning towards Oathsworn as coming in second place, specifically because it gives you these powers and abilities while still investing me in this incredible world of giant, freakish boss battling. After that, it's gonna be a close call. Middara, Vampire the Masquerade chapters, and Vagrantsong all do things that are unique. If I'm looking for an immersive RPG experience, something that makes me feel like I'm playing an RPG board game without a DM, Vampire the Masquerade chapters is going to take it. If I love Japanese JRPGs and a little bit more of a classic dungeon crawl, Middara has it in spades. And if I want a small box experience, something that I can approach and play solo, then I think I have to go with Vagrantsong. Along with that, depending on player count, if I have a 2-player game or a 3-player game that I'm running, I'd say Kingdom Death is going to be top of the line there. I'd then bring over to Vampire the Masquerade chapters and Oathsworn. If I'm playing a solo player game, I think it's got to be Vagrantsong. I'm cutting out Vampire the Masquerade chapters. I'm potentially tossing in Middara, because some of the flavor text can be a lot to read if you're playing with an entire group of people, so maybe that'll be rewarding to sit down. I haven't tried it myself. And Vampire the Masquerade chapters can be run solo, but preferred is definitely going to be 2, 3, or, yeah, 2 or 3. If I'm playing a 4-player game, I don't think I want Kingdom Death, because the odds of someone dying is going to be extremely high. I think at 4 players, the top of the line for me is going to have to be Middara and Oathsworn. So you kind of have a sense of where my numbers lie when it comes to player count, comes to genre of game, and comes to the size, scale, and approach of them. In terms of the commitment and the table space, of course, the biggest is going to be Kingdom Death. Following up on that, I think, is going to be Middara. Then we're going to have Oathsworn. Then we're going to have Vampire the Masquerade chapters, kind of tied with Vagrantsong. They both can spread out if need be. They both can condense if need be. In terms of the time it takes to actually sit down and play these games, I think that Kingdom Death is going to be at the top, ranging from anywhere from 1.5 to 3 hours. I think Oathsworn and Middara are going to be tied, and then Vampire the Masquerade chapters is going to come in around that 30 minutes per player, 45-minute campaign, and Vagrantsong is going to be in that hour to an hour and a half range, depending on how experienced you are with the game and how many players you have. If you're playing solo, that hour is really the sweet spot. Anything higher than that, your enemies, your haints are going to be getting a lot more turns than I'd prefer them to have. So, there you have it. These are the 5 campaign games we're currently playing through and experiencing. I intend to get to the end of all of these games. Whether it's this year or next, I'm not quite sure. Some of them will go on the back burner while other things come in that we have to cover here on the channel, but we're committed to these, and we're genuinely enjoying all of them quite a bit. So let me know, what campaign games are you playing, and what out of the 5 of these are you the most excited to get down to the table as soon as possible? Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing: get out and play some games. We'll see you next time. Bye.